My name is Melissa Hart. I'm 39 years old, and on a warm Friday evening, betrayal waited for me behind a closed living room door. It was my son, Ethan, who first made me stop. He stood in the hallway, trying to act casual, his hand awkwardly gripping the doorframe, shoulders tense. "Mom, you don't need to go in yet," he said with a nervous laugh. But laughter doesn't lie. It trembled, like guilt trying to stay polite. Inside, I heard music, clinking glasses, and the easy, confident chuckle of my husband, David. That sound had once calmed me, steady, protective. But lately it just felt loud, like someone trying too hard to sound innocent. I tried to move past Ethan. He stepped right again, blocking me with a shaky smile. "What's going on?" I asked softly. He looked at me, his 17-year-old eyes flickering between fear and pity. "Mom, maybe just don't." But I did. I pushed the door open. The air died. So did every sound, every face in that living room. Their smiles froze mid-sentence, like I'd interrupted a secret no one wanted to admit existed. And then I saw her. A woman, maybe mid-20s, glossy hair, wearing my husband's favorite cologne on her neck. Her manicured hand was deep in David's pocket, like she belonged there. He didn't even flinch. He just smirked and said, "Relax, Melissa. I've been doing this for years." My hand trembled against the door. I wanted to scream, but my voice broke before it even reached my throat. Then Ethan whispered, barely audible, but loud enough to crack something inside me. "Everyone knows, Mom. She's our second mom." If betrayal has ever silenced you, share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more. I thought that was the worst moment of my life, until David told me why he'd chosen her. After I closed the door, everything narrowed. My heart was a drum. My legs worked like rubber. I remember thinking about the little betrayals first, how they accumulate until they become a thing that can be named. David had been charming for years. That charm paid the mortgage and opened doors. He ran a small tech consultancy. He had a laugh for boardrooms and a temper that drained when plans went wrong. Ethan, my son, was almost 17. Tall and quiet, with a patience that came from watching me carry more than I was given. Then there was my mother, Joan, who kept the holidays on schedule and believed in appearances as armor. She favored curated goodness and often advised me to keep the house tidy. Aunt May was different. Her hands were calloused from nursing, her mailbox full of postcards and honest advice. She was the one who'd brought casseroles when Ethan's fever burned whole nights. If you're watching this, share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more. I had seen signs, little ones that in the moment looked like late nights, business dinners, projects, a lipstick stain once. A hurried text he swore was from a vendor. A phone call hung up when I came into the kitchen. I told myself, honestly, that marriage bends into weird shapes sometimes. We grew used to each other's secrets shaped by necessity. Loans, a school fund, favors done as if they were ordinary. But Ethan had known. Kids know things we ignore. He began blocking the doorway. He walked between us with the small, deliberate body language of a mediator. He started leaving the room when David and I argued, and then he started leaving the room when they laughed too long with each other. He taught me an entirely new vocabulary, how children translate adult secrets into brave silences. I asked Ethan later why he'd blocked me. He said nothing useful at first. He just looked at his hands. Finally, I needed you to see. It was a simple sentence. It was a demand. When I pressed David that night, he smiled, a smile that became an instrument. "It's not what you think," he said. "She's a friend." Later he added, "We have a practical arrangement." Practical. A word to tidy cruelty Aunt May called the next morning. She'd seen the young woman once at the market. She brought a bowl of stew and an old ledger she'd kept. "People forget who feeds the kids," she said. "Keep the receipts." She always said it that way, like a mantra. I kept the receipts. I kept the receipts, and a pattern started to show. I went back through small things like a detective. Receipts, photos, calendar invites, emails hidden behind updates. A vendor named R. Allen that apparently needed an expensive consultation twice a month. Hotel points transferred to a private account. Little transfers labeled gift that repeated on payday. David had skill. He was good at convincing people what he wanted them to see. He could make an invoice sound useful. He could make a romantic lunch sound like a client meeting. But spreadsheets are unforgiving if you know how to read them. I did. I work part-time as a freelance copy editor. Language is a habit. Numbers tell stories. Ethan sat beside me while I pulled things together. He had learned to lean into quiet. He read each line with a calm fury. "You'll want dates," he said. "You'll want proof she stayed over." He was practical the way teenagers are when pushed into grown roles. It was both horrifying and useful. I built a ledger of my own. Not angry notes, but a clear map, dates, amounts, places. I traced weeks when David claimed on call and found receipts for spa treatments and dinners downtown with a name I didn't recognize in his phone. I called the number and got a voice that said, "Ray's personal concierge." The voice was syrupy and practiced. At night I watched their social feed, the polished edges of their life. The young woman, Ray, posted snapshots of cocktails with friends and photos at restaurants that matched the receipts. She never tagged David publicly. She was careful, garnished, like a dish made for show. I confronted David with the ledger. He laughed the first time, the kind of laugh that tries to shrink the room. "You're playing detective," he said. "Don't make a life of this." He moved towards the door. I stopped him with a thick envelope of printouts. He looked at the pages and his face didn't change the truth. He didn't deny the dates. He offered a new word. Complicated. He said it as if complexity justified concealment. I counted the number of complicated nights in the ledger and felt them like a series of small cuts. Aunt May brought over a small box of paper, cards Ethan had kept when he was small, notes he'd once tucked under the pillow for me. "You'll need a reminder of what you did," she said. Her voice had a steadiness that matched the ledger. When I showed the ledger to David's partner at the firm, she didn't look surprised. She looked guilty. I arranged a lunchtime meeting at a neutral cafe with one clear rule: no drama. I was calm because the ledger had steadied me. I would speak with proof. I invited one person unexpectedly, Ray, through a professional email, posing as a client asking about branding partnerships. She agreed. She arrived in a soft blouse and a smile trained for friendly encounters. She had charm that made people forgive lack of clarity. I watched how she moved, how she used light phrases to change topics. When she sat down, I put the ledger between us like a plate of facts. We talked about work. I asked about events I'd seen on receipts. She answered, practiced and quick. She tried to make everything an innocent connection. "We collaborate," she said. "We help each other out." I slid a dated receipt across the table. Why is this dinner billed to client account when it matches your social post? The fork paused midair. Her composure looked thin under the ledger's light. Ray's eyes flicked up, then down. She told me economy lessons I already knew, about network building and mentorship. She painted herself as a young woman, trying to grow in a city of many small opportunities. But there was a casual swallowing pattern when confronted with that well-known dinner date. She altered. I left the cafe with things she didn't expect me to have: names of the hotels her card favored, an email address that matched her consulting contact. I had more than receipts. I had a trail. I began to understand structure, how people turned habit into habitus, how they layered plausible deniability over years. When I went home, David called and left a voicemail with the old banality: "We're family. Don't make a scene." I replayed it and then wrote down the words as if they were currency. They always had been in his mouth. Currencies to buy tolerance. That evening, Ethan placed a small envelope in my hand. Inside was a single photograph. Ray and David, arm in arm, outside a hotel with lights behind them. Ethan said low, "You wanted dates." I posted a single question to a private community board that night, and the reply I got changed everything. I posted a neutral question on a neighborhood business forum, something about recommended consultants for small local brands. I did it to sound ordinary, to see whether Ray's name would surface. It did faster than I expected. People sent private messages. Some were neutral. Some were sharp. One message came from a woman who'd worked as Ray's assistant for 6 months and wanted to talk. We met in an empty diner at dawn. She had the rawness of someone who'd been inside an engine room. She spoke quickly, eyes tired. She told me about patterns, free dinners, flashy promises, the way Ray would introduce him to opportunities that turned into payments. She described checks written in cash at the end of nights and partnerships that were really favors. Her tone was not moralizing. It was exhausted. Armed with this new voice, I dug deeper. I found invoices that listed meaningless line items and transfers that pointed to a small shell company registered in a neighboring county. It was tiny. It was legal, But tiny accounts multiply. I could have gone to police then. I could have shouted. But revenge is not always noise. It is sometimes architecture. I decided to build a schedule of exposure that would be precise and hard to reverse. Public accusations are messy. They can be used against you. So I planned with patience. I started by protecting Ethan. I changed passwords, shifted accounts, and set spending alerts. I wanted his teenage life to be as normal as possible. He watched me with a fierce new respect. "You don't have to fight him," he said once, "but don't let him pretend nothing happened." That was his version of support. Next, I scheduled small legal consultations. I didn't want to make a legal war out of revenge. I wanted leverage. I had found evidence that showed misuse of funds, transfers disguised as consulting that should have been disclosed on corporate ledgers. The firm where David worked had ethics rules about conflict of interest. That would be my hinge. As my network messages piled up, people who once smiled at our family gatherings reached out quietly to share details. Each whisper became a thread. Each thread would make a pattern. The town that once applauded David's charm would soon see the stitchwork. The day I presented my findings to David's firm, his calm face finally cracked. The firm took the matter seriously when the documents included appearances of client funds being redirected. An ethics panel was struck to review conduct. David's manager called him into a meeting where the ledger was no longer anecdote but evidence. He returned home that evening with a thin smile that had lost its polish. If betrayal has ever made you plan, tell me below and subscribe for more. Pressure changed how people moved. David began canceling long dinners when he'd once accepted them. He started answering calls with the clipped tone of someone watching his step. Lena, who had once flitted through parties like a butterfly, began to avoid events where people might ask questions. The young woman, Ray, started to post less. The assistant who had shared details withdrew an apology later, as if she feared retaliation. People are often kinder when danger finds them. We prepared a formal complaint and submitted it to the firm's compliance office with clear, time-stamped receipts and bank statements. The firm launched an investigation and temporarily suspended David from client-facing work. It was not public yet. It was sharp and private and devastating to his ego. That night, when he tried to speak, he found I had consented to nothing. I had control. I chose the rhythm. I offered him an out. Transparency, confession, counseling, or I would begin to make sections of the ledger public to the right people. Media that cared about small-town ethics, not tabloids hungry for the spectacle. He weighed his image against his choices. Ethan and I sat on the back steps and watched the sky. "He's been doing this so long," Ethan said. "People believe the performance." He had a quiet wisdom in his voice. "I don't want you to be angry." He meant I shouldn't burn every bridge. I understood. My plan was surgical. I would remove the ability to pretend rather than destroy the person, unless he forced my hand. The firm's board requested a meeting with us both. They wanted to hear my evidence, and they wanted a professional path forward. I walked in calm. I spoke plainly. They listened. Policies have weight. The weight began to tilt. 2 days later, a headline appeared that neither of us expected to see in our small town. The headline was careful: local consultancy under internal review after ethics complaint. It named the firm, not the player. The story was dry. It included quotes about due process and respect for privacy. But the story invited questions. Questions invite scrutiny. And in a town where appearances matter, scrutiny is pressure. If you've ever watched Consequence Land, right below, subscribe. This is where silence gets its shape. Donors called David's firm. Some withdrew pending the inquiry. A regular client requested a code of conduct. The board's tone shifted from supportive to cautious. David looked smaller in rooms where power used to make him large. He asked to meet privately. He asked for forgiveness. He proposed repayment plans for money moved. I asked for a public acknowledgement, tailored with the firm's counsel. Full disclosure to clients about conflicts. Restitution where misuse was proven. Mandatory training. And a commitment to transparency. We negotiated. He signed some items. He stalled on others. He apologized in a way that sounded rehearsed. The firm demanded documented remediation. The board required a plan and an independent auditor. That plan would cost him credibility and money. That was the point. The harm had value. The value should be paid. Ray disappeared from social posts that week. She posted a short note about needing space, and people accepted it. Some local bloggers sniffed for sensation. They did not find screaming headlines. They found a slow, organized administrative unraveling. At home, conversations that once were only about what to cook turned to logistics. Who would handle bills? Which accounts were joint? Which needed protection? I tightened my control over our finances quietly. I moved savings where they would not be impulsively touched. I set up alerts for transfers and a second signature requirement. I told Ethan, no one should be able to empty a life alone. He nodded, and then David made a choice that changed everything. He walked into the press conference with a manila envelope. The press conference was calm. David stood with a pale face. He read a short, jangled statement about mistakes, about poor judgment, about regret. He announced a leave of absence. He announced that the firm would review client accounts where conflicts were alleged. He said the word sorry in a way that had the sound of obligation. If you've ever forgiven someone who didn't deserve it, tell me below. And don't forget to subscribe for more true tales. But the manila envelope mattered. Inside were documents the firm asked for. Signed statements acknowledging misuse in certain cases and a plan for restitution. He had signed. He had opened accounts of his own volition to make right where the ledger had shown wrong. The firm released a public remediation schedule. Media attention inched away from rumor toward process. It was not vindictive theater. It was accountability, slow and effective. Ray issued a brief apology online. She said she had overstepped and asked for privacy. The assistant who had spoken to me earlier lost a job, and then found one that respected ethical lines. People adjusted. Some relationships ended. Some repaired modestly. At home, the hardest part was personal, rebuilding trust. David and I entered therapy. It was messy and honest. He was contrite in ways that were small and practical. He did things that mattered. He attended the counseling I requested, he funded restitution, and he accepted oversight. He did not earn immediate forgiveness. He earned a process. Ethan watched all of it with the wary hope of a teenager grown into a man. One night, after months of the slow climb, David left a small envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside was his resignation from discretionary accounts and a check for restitution. The check was not enough to erase what we had lost, but it was an admission that action must follow words. I didn't make a spectacle. I filed one final document with the firm and with our local paper. It was a short statement. We have achieved an agreed remediation plan. Independent oversight will continue. This is a commitment to change. I posted nothing inflammatory. I wanted structure, not cruelty. Then, in the quiet, I went to the bedroom and sat on the bed. I thought about the years of small clefts, lipstick, missed calls, sly excuses. I thought about ledger lines and the way truth looks in black and white. I thought about Ethan, who had become my ally and my constant. I typed one last message to the small circle that had watched and supported me. Aunt May, a neighbor who'd brought pies, a friend at the firm. I wrote, "We did it. We made it cost more to hide." I hit send. Then I sent a single message to David, short and final. Do the work. Stay honest. He replied with one word. Understood. I walked to the kitchen, unlocked the cabinet where the spare key used to be, and placed it in a small box. I labeled the box Choices. I put it on the top shelf where it would collect dust. Revenge punch. Structure makes their absence costly.